In a world where agility and innovation drive success, leadership and culture transformation continue to shape workplaces. However, as organizations strive to meet the demands of a rapidly changing business environment, there is a growing emphasis on skill based training to address immediate needs. This shift in L&D strategies raises the question: how can companies ensure long term culture focus and leadership initiatives maintain momentum without losing sight of pressing priorities? Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv Jayaraman, CEO and founder of KNOLSKAPE, and I welcome all of you to another episode of the Learning Curve powered by KNOLSKAPE. And today, I have with me on the podcast someone who is leading the global people and DEI strategy for one of the largest internet companies in the world. Serkan Deveci, Global Human Resources Lead International Sales at Google. Serkan is a seasoned HR leader with over 15 years of experience in workforce planning, strategic talent management, and driving culture and employee engagement. A globally recognized keynote speaker, he specializes in the future of work, leadership effectiveness, and change management. With a diverse background, in addition to HR that includes leading large sales teams and marketing roles in various industries, Serkan combines business acumen with HR expertise. He also has a master's degree in neuroscience, wow, and is pursuing his PhD in organizational psychology, double wow. His passion lies in creating engaging employee experiences, cultivating positive cultures, and driving organizational success. Hi, Sarkar. Welcome to the Learning Curve.
Hi, Raju. Pleasure to be with you.
Awesome. Before we move to the discussion, I have a quick rapid fire section for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What is the most exciting thing about the future of work?
I think definitely the focus on human skills. AI increases productivity, but it's a co-pilot rather than a replacement for humans. So the real game changer, I think, is about upskilling people.
Awesome. I love that. One thing that every leader should do when it comes to talent engagement.
Okay. Make it personal. So engagement isn't one size fits all. So forget the big, fancy, generic programs. Instead, really know your people and understand what really drives them.
In other words, personalize.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Right. And a hidden talent that you have.
Okay. I've got myself into learning Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, don't test me on that. I'm not good at it anymore. But there was a time when I wanted to show off with friends. It, just got the job done.
Awesome. And is there anything specific you learned from reading the hieroglyphs?
I love museums. I love museums. And I had a special interest in Egyptian history as well. So I just want to, and by the way, I would say, kind of, well, talented, let's say, in languages. I try to learn Greek and Arabic. So I was thinking, why not Egyptian hieroglyphs? So there you go. I tried it. It was nice. I am quite rusty at the moment, but I can pick it up.
Awesome. I love that. And if you could teleport to any place in the world right now, where would it be?
Mauritius. No question on that. It's white sand, turquoise water. I'm very bad with cold weather, and it's winter here. So Mauritius tops the list for me right now and probably always.
Awesome. Love that. And what's that one thing on your bucket list for 2025?
Taking my daughter on a trip to East and Southeast Asia. We love traveling, and hopefully we're going to start with China, then Japan, Singapore, and ending in Thailand.
All right. Can I request you to add India into the itinerary? It'll be awesome to host you.
Absolutely. It's actually my childhood dream. So, okay, Egypt and India, it was always my top of the list. And hopefully we're going to do it. Maybe not this year, but probably next year.
Okay, awesome. That was a wonderful rapid fire section, Serkan. Thank you so much for that. And we shall now move to a more detailed discussion on the real topic on our hand. Can you take us through your career journey from sales and marketing leadership to HR strategy, and then to a global keynote speaker in leadership and employee engagement. That's quite a journey, right? And what have been some defining moments or milestones in this journey?
Sure. My career journey, as you also described briefly, has been anything but linear. But as I always say, I'm a person who focuses on not drawing a career path, but creating a career portfolio. So I started nearly 2 decades ago in sales and marketing back in Turkey. I worked in marketing and brand management in FMCG and banking before moving to Dublin about 15 years ago. And that's when I joined Google's sales team, first managing Turkish accounts, then stepping into a global role leading sales strategy and operations for 25 emerging and growing markets in all 3 regions. And then I led a sales team for Spain and Portugal, running a 10-figure business. It was fast paced, as you can imagine, high energy, and exactly the kind of commercial and people experience that shapes how I think about business today. At the same time, something interesting was happening in the industry. There was an intentional shift where companies started bringing commercial leaders into HR leadership roles. Some listeners might remember when CHROs, CPOs, and heads of HR were being pulled from sales and marketing and other commercial functions into HR. And for me, it all started when my boss in sales made that move to HR. A few months later, she came to me with an idea and she said, "Why don't you join me in HR for sales?" Now, I've always had a deep interest in people, culture, and organizational design. It was something I naturally paid attention to. So I thought, if not here, which company would offer a job in HR after a decade-long career in sales? So I made the leap, and that was 7 years ago. What I brought with me was a business perspective because I didn't have a formal HR training or education. But what I brought with me, as I said, is that commercial mindset. So understanding strategic goals, linking HR strategy and business goals together, and being a strategic partner for people with business leaders. Um, Eventually, this move also encouraged me to fulfill a long time dream for doing a master's degree in neuroscience with an application on organizations, and then to go really deep on leadership behaviors in companies with a PhD in psychology. Um, you can say there's a bit of a thinker, philosopher in me. And more than that, I like action and being hands on. So everything I do in my studies have direct application, practicality for me at my work. And on top of it, I like sharing what I learn, what I know, experience, observe. And because that's how I think, we create an environment where we share, think, and influence more deeply on impact for people. So I started to do keynote talks on leadership, organizational culture, and employee engagement. And well, along the way, I've been lucky to cross paths with so many great people like yourself.
Awesome. And listening to you speak about your background makes me realize that you're such an amazing amalgamation of many things. One, there is a philosopher inside you. There's a linguist, right? There is a person who has business acumen, has passion for sales, and there's a teacher, there's a speaker, right? And there's, you know, very rarely does one come across people who are left-brained and right-brained at the same time. So, yeah, great to have you again on this podcast, and
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
excited. And with this kind of blend of experiences you've had from sales to marketing, HR leadership,
Mhm.
and you're now engaging in deep research on leadership and engagement, and you've spoken extensively in your keynote talks about leadership behaviors and their impact on culture, right? I'd like to circle back to the earlier point about culture transformation efforts losing traction from an L&D perspective, right? So there's a
Mm.
lot of L&D effort that goes into it goes inside organizations, but they lose steam, right? And the impact on culture is hardly seen. What's been your personal observation with this? What challenges do you see in measuring the impact of culture transformation initiatives?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because culture transformation is one of those things that companies and leaders frequently talk about, but The tricky part is sustaining it, especially when other business priorities takes over. And L&D, or learning and development teams, they play a big role here, but not in isolation. The transformation, in my mind, has to be co-led by the leaders, HR, and L&D all together. And one challenge I see is that companies tend to treat culture change or culture transformation like a one-off project. So
Yeah.
you see a big launch and some training sessions, maybe a leadership offsite, and then they move on to the next priority. But really, if you think about it, culture isn't built through a workshop. It's shaped by daily leadership behaviors, the decisions leaders make, and how those decisions align with what the company says it values. I think it also requires building leadership capabilities. So the leaders reinforce the culture with their everyday behaviors rather than just, I don't know, verbally communicating it. Because at the end of the day, culture is shaped by everyday actions, not just by statements. And leaders need to role model those actions. They should reinforce the culture through what they do, not just what they say. Another challenge is pace. So transformation, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And leaders, especially in fast-moving environments, they tend to get impatient when things don't land quickly with teams. But the most important thing in cultural transformation is patience and consistency. So the patience to emphasize, re-emphasize, and then re-emphasize again. And in addition to that, consistency, because real transformation happens over time. So it requires delivering the same message over and over again. And maybe more importantly, consistently role modeling the behaviors and everyday actions. So for me, the question is really embedding culture into how the business runs rather than treating it as an L&D initiative that sits on the side.
Yeah, I love that answer you have. Back in the day, I'd written a short article about organizational culture. This was back in the day when we were a really small startup. And there's a choice to make, right? What kind of culture do we build, right? And it's an intentional process. You can't just let it be. And you will have a culture for sure. But is it something that you want to have, or is it something that organically grows? Back then, one of the things that I thought about is Netflix had launched this culture code where they clearly said, we are not a family, we are a sports team,
Mhm.
right? So that kind of clarity in terms of who we are as an organization. And, there are others who say, we are not a family, we are not a sports team, we are an army unit, right? And there are others who say, we are a sports team, but with family values built in. You look at a few maybe English Premier League teams that feel more like family, right? They're together, right? So I can learn a lot from what he just said about having some sense of clarity in terms of what that cultural mental model is and staying consistent with it, right? And then role modeling from a leader standpoint.
Yeah, and I love how you put it. It's the choices that we make. So it's being really intentional in the decision making, authentic in our behaviors, and to support what we choose our culture to be. I really love it.
Yeah, and in today's context, Serkan, so with AI coming into the workplace, right? There are people who are innovative and fast-paced, others who are cautious and thoughtful. What are you seeing in terms of leadership attitudes when it comes to introducing AI in the workplace?
I'm, I always say there is really a very wide range of attitudes to technology, but if we have to oversimplify it, so simply speaking, we could group these into three main categories. The first group moves fast. They are early adopters. They are always eager to experiment and to gain a competitive edge. They're probably those people who buy the first new smartphones as soon as it's on the market.
Right.
And now they're testing different technologies, different AI tools, integrating them into their workflows as much as possible. And what you can see with them is they're comfortable with the unknown and willing to take risks. Now, there's the second group who are more cautious. They are like those who first dip their toes in to check the temperature of water before swimming. They probably use major technologies, but they haven't fully embedded AI into their daily operations yet. So they're observing and learning before committing. And then there is the third group, which can be, I don't know, described as hesitance, not in a like a negative sense, but they're new to AI and they have questions. They're more likely to wait until it becomes a standard tool before engaging. But regardless of which group the leader is in, for me, the most important focus is upskilling, cross-skilling, and reskilling people in their organizations. Technology is advancing at a very high speed. So the question is, how can leaders help and support their people to adapt just as quickly? That's why up, cross, and reskilling are important. AI offers great potential, but its true power is unlocked when combined with human skills and intelligence.
Right.
There is this influential professor of economics, Gregory Clark. I'm sure some of your listeners are very familiar with his amazing research and thoughts on economic history, industrial revolutions, and social transformations. And Professor Clark argues that AI will not take people's jobs away. Rather, people will take on roles that require more advanced decision-making abilities. So it's a shift and not a replacement he's talking about. And really, the opportunity is to then make sure that employees, all people, have the skills to not just keep up with change, but to lead it, to navigate it with confidence and great competence. What becomes, if you think about it, even more important here is what we call higher level skills in psychology, like critical thinking, creativity, decision making, complex problem solving. So leaders should create a culture of continuous learning and adaptation where people are encouraged to explore, to experiment, to embrace new technologies. And I suppose, practically speaking, this means creating that opportunity for training, mentorship, knowledge sharing, an environment and culture where it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them.
I love that. So one of the things that we are learning from many leaders in the industry is the need for psychological safety, right? So this spirit of experimentation and taking these smart bets and all of that comes when there is a safety net in the organization, when there is psychological safety. That's perhaps something that leaders can start building as a cultural thing, right? A pillar within the organization.
Absolutely.
So the next one I wanted to double click on is basically when you think about leadership in the future, right? And this is a rapidly evolving world. Every week there is a new AI update that's happening, and business models are changing. In that context, what are successful? What do successful leaders look like in the future, and how can organizations nurture these traits?
I'll piggyback on what you just said there about the psychological safety and broaden it to probably engagement. So the very fundamentals of effective leadership is the ability to develop an engaged team, engage people who are motivated, happy, excited, interested, positively ambitious to grow and drive results and performance. So effective leadership comes down to three main things: connection, growth, and purpose. When leaders create an environment where people feel connected, where they are growing, where they have a clear purpose, engagement doesn't have to be forced then. It happens naturally, and that's when performance really takes off. And in all of this, adaptability becomes a critical leadership trait. Because as you also said, markets shift, new challenges emerge, and leaders must be able to assess the situation, process new information, and guide their teams through that uncertainty. The magic here is the decision-making ability, in my mind, by balancing data and gut feeling. So data provides, as we all know, clarity, patterns, and insights, but gut feeling, the experience, intuition, judgment, it helps leaders make sense of the gray areas in the data. And the best decisions don't come from one or the other, they come from knowing to use both of them at the same time. And another effective leadership quality is, we're all talking about change and transformation. And if you think about it, their best friends are transparency and authenticity. These words are used in abundance. They nearly become buzzwords when talking about leadership, right? But they are key traits in leadership because people don't just follow instructions, they follow leaders that they trust. And many companies have wonderful communication and PR teams. They craft, great talking points and speeches for leaders to use. These are all very important and helpful, of course. But the real impact is when leaders speak and act authentically to connect with their teams, when they can add their own voice and character into it. And this really builds trust, and the message then resonates in a genuine way.
Awesome. I love that. And if there's something that I can steal from you, Serkan, it'll be your PhD and your focus on neuroscience. These are areas that I'm deeply interested and passionate about as well. So the next question is on that. So with your background in neuroscience, what insights have you learned about the art of engaging? I think you spoke about this connection, growth, and purpose. Specifically, when it comes to learning programs, right, where we are seeing that the employee does not have all the time in the world to take time away from work to learn. So they are distracted, they are overwhelmed, they are impatient, and we are all impatient as well as people today. So what is your key learning from neuroscience and organizational psychology that you can use to create really compelling, engaging learning programs?
Oh, that's a great question. And you'll see that I'm very passionate about this topic. There are a lot of neuroscientific myths and misunderstood information, and some of them are so popular that they're accepted wrongly as truth. So I won't talk about the oversimplified idea of, people having distinct learning styles like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or another wrongly known truth is logical left brain and creative right brain, oversimplified categorization. Honestly, we can have another entire hour to debunk all those myths. When it comes to designing learning programs, we can't overlook the brain's natural way of engaging with new information. The brain is naturally drawn to novelty, emotional relevance, and information that connects with what we already know. This is why learning isn't just about absorbing content. So an effective learning program should be designed in a way to provoke the sense of growth, create those connections, and give people a feeling of purpose through learning. For me, the best learning experiences challenge people to stretch beyond their comfort zones. And the brain thrives on the new challenges. It requires problem solving and critical thinking. So learning is not just about taking in the facts, but about creating a growth mindset. The more we allow learners to push their boundaries, the more they feel they're truly growing. And this taps into the brain's reward system, where the release of dopamine motivates us to seek out new information because it feels rewarding us for progress. And it's that sense of achievement that keeps us engaged and wanting to go further. Another one is learning needs to be or to feel relevant. People learn better when they understand how it applies to their role, their goals, their bigger picture. And that's why I'm talking about purpose. If you can show learners, if you can show people why something matters, why it's important for their work or for their development, it instantly becomes more motivating. This engagement then is driven by the brain's natural desire for meaning and purpose. And interestingly, it activates neurotransmitters like serotonin, which are associated with feelings of fulfillment and satisfaction. Leaders and educators or teachers, they must be able to clearly articulate the why behind the learning. When people understand how what they are learning will help them grow and achieve their goals, the learning experience becomes much more impactful, because this clarity, it arouses intrinsic motivation. And so learners internalize the new knowledge in a way that really sticks. I could keep on going with other examples, but I'll leave it there. Brain and understanding human behavior from a neurological perspective is fascinating. It really shows learning isn't just about dumping information into someone's head, but equally, it's not about this idea of let's activate left brain activity here, and an hour later, let's switch to right brain, or even let's play with mud because you are kinesthetic type. It's far more nuanced than that. The deeper we understand this, the more powerful the learning experiences we can create.
Absolutely. So my daughter is appearing for her 10th standard exams now, and I was showing her a video about how human brain sort of absorbs new information. So most of what you mentioned, struck a chord with me. One of the things that I was talking to her about is this idea of spaced retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So once you expose yourself to a new idea, you have to expose yourself to the same idea over a period of time till it becomes second nature, and you say there's a sense of familiarity with that concept. And this idea of also I think making it an emotional connect for yourself, right? There's a lot of dry facts that you learn in geography or history. Chances are you're not going to be able to recall most of that after a couple of days. But how do you create an emotional connect with whatever you are learning so that it sort of becomes personal for you? Right. And
So
earlier on, you alluded to this in terms of making it personal, right? And I want to touch upon that. When you construct employee engagement initiatives, or when you're trying to motivate people, develop connection in different teams, how do you apply some of these learnings in a practical way? Can you give an example?
um, let me talk about the engagement, right? Because I think you mentioned motivation and connection in the team. So it is completely correlated and linked to the human engagement today. So employee engagement, human engagement, it's a vast topic and an interesting topic. And there are leaders who are all in for increasing engagement. They deeply understand how an engaged person makes a greater impact and shows considerably much better performance. And there are other leaders with whom you have to start from scratch every time you talk about engagement or motivation and connection, because they see it as a soft, fluffy stuff.
Yeah.
But in fact, business and people strategy, they're inseparable. They're not distinct things. It's people who drive business, and you can't have one without the other. But focusing predominantly on business numbers when making decisions, or the other way around, focusing only on people, both will leave gaps. The key is the balance. An
Yeah.
effective leader will be able to strike that balance. They understand the nuances of both business and people decisions, and they are able to make future looking decisions, not just reactive ones aimed at saving the day. And it's really that balance what drives long term success. At its core, engagement is an emotional connection. Fundamentally, it's feelings and emotions that drive people. And so at work, engagement is driven by how we experience growth, purpose, and connection. I always come back to those three things. Our brains are constantly assessing whether something is worth our attention and effort. When work stimulates that curiosity, challenge, and meaning, engagement follows. Take growth. Um, if people don't see a future for themselves, they disengage. And growth isn't just about promotions, it's about learning, expanding skills, feeling challenged in meaningful ways. Purpose is another key driver. The brain craves meaning and coherence. We are, simply speaking, wired to look for patterns and connections in what we do. If people don't see why their work matters, they disengage. But interestingly, purpose is something, it's sometimes a confusing concept. In the business mindset, when we hear purpose, most of us tend to think about something bigger, altruistic, world changing, mission and vision statements. It can be all of those, of course. And it can also well be something very personal, related to our own career goals, financial goals, personal goals. Purpose is something that is deeply individual. And I talk about connection, and but I'm not talking about, when I say connection, let's all bond over a happy hour kind connection, but the kind that makes people feel valued and trusted. When teams have strong relationships and a culture of trust, engagement naturally follows. I think it goes back to what you said, all those examples that you gave about making a choice for an intentional culture. It's family, it is an army unit, it is a sports unit, whatever it is. But do people have that feeling of strong relationship? I always say that team building activities, gym membership discounts, leadership offsites, they're all brilliant, but they are not enough to create engagement or long lasting motivation. Leaders have to go beyond surface level solutions. It's those drivers that I just talked about and integrate them into daily work, but not just engagement initiatives. And that's when leaders build teams that are motivated and connected.
Oh, I love that. There's a beautiful framework that you've given us today. I can almost see a book coming out of this because I think it's so well articulated. I might just add one more C at the beginning of what you said. So you spoke about connection, growth, and purpose, and I'm connecting this to engagement from a social media perspective. It's one of the trivial use cases you can think about, where what makes me look at a video, for example, is some level of novelty,
Mm,
right? So that's the curiosity element, the C that I was talking about. There's something interesting that makes me curious about that. So the engagement that that video gets out of me is maybe for a few seconds. I look at a singing cat. How long can I look at that? Maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds. But after that, I'm going to disengage. Then comes the connection aspect where something connects with me at a slightly more deeper level. And I'm like, that's interesting because that's relevant to me. I might disconnect from that as well till I see growth happen for myself. Then I want to do it again. And I might drop off from there as well till I hit upon this whole idea of purpose, at which time I'm willing to commit to whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? So that's a beautiful arc there in terms of commitment that you get from people, going beyond just motivation. And we know motivation has a lifespan, right? It,
yeah.
it can happen right now, it can dissipate in like 15 minutes, but how do you sustain that motivation over a period of time? I think you've got a brilliant framework for that. And thanks for sharing that with us today. And I have one final question for you. What is it one thing you have learned or tried in the last year?
Mhm. It's a great question. One thing I have been more intentional about in the last year is observing how people make decisions, not just what they decide, but how they get there. Whether it's leaders making business calls, teams navigating uncertainty, or even my own decision making, I've been paying closer attention to the mix of intuition, logic, biases, data, and external pressures at play. It's been an interesting reminder, I suppose, that decision making is rarely as rational as we like to think. We justify choices with logic, but so much of it is shaped by patterns, experiences, emotions, and even the need of cognitive ease.
Yeah.
And when you see that clearly, you can be more aware of your own blind spots, challenge assumptions, and help others do the same. It's something I'll keep exploring for sure because the way we make decisions shapes everything.
I love that. Cool. And that brings us to the close of this wonderful podcast. It was filled with great insights. Thank you so much, Sarkan, for this lovely chat. The insights and experiences you shared with us in this discussion is something I'm sure the viewers and listeners will find great value in. And thanks to all our viewers and listeners for tuning in to the Learning Curve. We shall be back in the next episode with another great personality and insights on making organizations, leaders, and the workforce ready for the future. Until next time, take care and goodbye.